out there for this one, but also the act of actually migrating something from one version of IP to another. It's actually not as, it's not trivial, right? And folks need to understand what the impact that is to their subscribers. One of the mottos of our deployment is it should be relatively impact-free to the subscriber. Subscribers should never know when that has happened to a device that is in their proximity.
I'll hit one other point with this. As a service provider, you're literally, as the word says, you're providing a service to your end customer. That means you've got as much issue at getting the technology to work and deploy as you do at getting the network operations center trained, so that when you phone as a customer and say, I have an issue, it so happens to be an IPv6 issue, you aren't really responding with the, that's Joe's issue. He's not in today. He'll be in on Friday. That's really not what the end customer wants to hear. You need to be, and we put the effort into this. It happens by being involved and running an IPv6 network for a length of time, where you basically can answer the phone at any level and know whether it's a V4 or a V6 question and get the answer to the customer, debug the problem, deal with the issue, whether it's peering or a customer level. And in fact, actually, that really is not only a conscious decision, but it also comes out of the very first thing you said about being prepared. This isn't something you're going to turn on in 3.5 minutes. The technology may be there if you've bought new equipment. If it's out there deployed, it may be ready. You may even go out with an RFP today and say, I want to have V6 enabled hardware for any level of function in the network. And you may not touch it for another 2 years, but in 2 years and a day when you want to turn it on, you'll really wish you had, the length of time needed to have the area of expertise. We've said this to our customers: is get ready now, even if you don't have an end goal, an end requirement, a customer requirement today, because that will happen, and it's as guaranteed as can be. So put the effort in now. The experience really pays off for just about everything.
To kind of extend on what Martin mentioned just a minute ago, was that parts of it may be easy. A lot of it will depend on how new your infrastructure is. The key is how old is your infrastructure as well, and to what extent and services are you providing as both a core infrastructure and an ISP type company. We literally are going to have to go through every system by system, operating system by operating system, application by application, to see what the impact is. If they're on newer systems, newer platforms, it may be a simple OS upgrade, or it may be just a reconfiguration to turn it on. The applications themselves, do they have embedded IP addresses that require development and significant testing to make sure it functions? Or is it an application you buy from a vendor that you have to get on their roadmap to make sure their application supports it? It is an extensive process when you look at the end-to-end impact across your entire enterprise. And that just depends on the level and extent of your infrastructure and what kind of services you're providing.
Yeah, I think planning is key. It's come up several times, but we didn't even have a capital budget for dual stacking our backbone, because we've been thinking about it for so long that for 3 or 4 years it had always been part of our hardware, software, OS refresh cycle. So when we were ready to do it, I think in the end we had to buy some soup cards and some memory, and it was kind of immaterial from a budget standpoint. So if you really plan, you can really minimize the amount of expense it's going to take. From our standpoint, we didn't feel it was too painful. But I think, as you can see, in the easiest part's the core, and as you get closer to the edge, it gets a little more difficult. And then when the rubber hits the road at the end customers, and if you're an IT director in an enterprise, it's even going to be more difficult, because then you're dealing with things like desktops and Microsoft and printers and stuff like that. So it depends on your perspective. But I tend to be an optimist of it. I think if there's good planning, it's not nearly as painful as I think some people make it out to be. One thing, if you guys like the O'Reilly books, Sylvia Hagen wrote the Snail book. The second edition of that has a bunch of case studies in it, which was a new thing. She asked me to write one for NTT. So if you're interested, go look at that. It talks. I wrote a little blurb on some of the trials and tribulations we had, and like Martin said, it's not just the technology. It's if you're going to charge customers for it, it's something you got to support. There's a lot of you got to be able to provision it. You got to be able to monitor it. So there's those aspects too. So I wrote about some of that in that book, and there's also some other good case studies in there too. If you're really interested in different perspectives of what different organizations have to do to upgrade their networks.
We've got some other questions here, but maybe is there questions that you all have out there?
I have a question if you have subscribers that actually have a choice between IPv4 and IPv6. It's kind of like, I guess it'd be analogous to recycling. Everybody wants to do the right thing and recycle. Well, it's a lot easier if you have curbside recycling. You come and pick up your recycling. Do you have options that your subscribers can say, hey, I'm signing up. Can I get a V6 address?
I can just real briefly. We're like Hurricane. We're an internet IP wholesaler basically. So we have kind of three flavors: dual stack, a tunneling service which nobody buys anymore, and just native V6. So our customers do have that option, and some of them may want to isolate the V6 environment. So they will buy a gig E circuit from us that's just native V6. We don't route them any V4 space because they want to keep it isolated, for example. But yeah, it's definitely something. Whenever we sell to our customers anymore, it's not, oh, do you want V6? It's like, oh, do you want V4 or do you want a dual stack? How do you want it? Your question might be a little more directed toward end users, so maybe John has some comments on that.
Yeah, so I'll kind of answer you with a question momentarily. So if you had V6 connectivity today, and this is actually something that we talked about this morning to prepare for this, if you had V6 connectivity only, what would you see on the internet?
I would expect to see everything I see now with V4.
That's not the case, right? So that's actually one of the things that we hope to raise awareness of here is outside of 100 websites that are probably maintained by, some internet, people who are, that we all probably know collectively, all 100 of them. There's really not a whole lot out there. Even, Google not too long ago, probably back in the March timeframe, you can go to IPv6.google.com. Only over IPv6, but it's really only kind of the front end to get in there. The one thing that you'll find, which is very important to note, is that the vast majority of the content that you as a subscriber sitting in behind your broadband connection want to go and consume, it's just simply not available over IPv6. It's a very important fact.
Okay, well, obviously, then that's going to drive the migration of your subscriber base. So how do you get the application, the websites to at least support IPv6 location?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We can get that in just a second. What I wanted to say in addition to that last question was, please understand that IPv4 and IPv6 are not compatible protocols. So that means you have to prepare for the new. And I don't know how the different corporations will go as far as, will they provide a premium service? Do you get to choose, or do you get no choice? Part of that might be, where are you at in the time frame or the time cycle? We are eventually approaching exhaust for V4 addresses. So if you do run out, what do you do for those customers going forward? They're probably going to get a V6 only. Or if you have some on reserve or in the mobile environment, if you're not statically allocating an address to a user, you're dynamically giving the user address, you may still be able to get by giving them an address for their data sessions to reuse that address. But we see things like a dual stack as a migration technique to say, give them an